What is the smallest living thing you have ever encountered? Your responses might be different, like a housefly, a mosquito, or an ant. But, my friends, this is not the case since all of these insects are made up of even smaller components, which indicates that there is something much smaller of which these insects are made up of. This arises a simple question that, what are living organisms made up of? So, cell is the most basic unit of all life. The literal meaning of a cell is a little room. The cell was discovered by Robert Hooke when he was examining a slice of cork under his own microscope, in which he saw little compartments or boxes which resembled honeycomb structure, and he named it cell. Some tiniest organisms like bacteria, viruses are made up of only single cell, and some bigger organisms like insects, animals and humans, they are made up of more than one cell. In case of humans like you, are made up of billions of cells combined together to form tissues, organs and the whole body of human beings. Cells are the basic structural and functional unit of life. Let's understand how. So, what is the smallest thing a building is made up of? Your answer must be a brick. Similarly, if we see a life that is an organism, its smallest unit is a cell. That means if we observe a structure, the smallest unit of which it is made up of is its structural unit. Now, to understand functional units, imagine the number of activities a human body does. Similarly, every cell is doing its own functions individually, hence it's the functional unit of life. Now, let's see what cell theory given by Schleiden and Schwann says. 1. All living things are composed of cells. 2. Cells are the basic unit of life. 3. New cells arise from pre-existing cells. Let's observe some different types of cells in our own body. Nerve cells, intestinal cells, red blood cells, ovum, white blood cells, bone cells, and sperm cells. So these are some cells we have just observed of which our body is made of. So as you have just seen the cells of different sizes and shapes, the shape and size of cells are related to the specific function they perform. And there are some cells like amoeba, which is a single-celled organism that changes shape. In some cases, the cell shape could be more or less fixed and peculiar for a particular type of cell. For example, nerve cells have a typical shape, and it has a bit of complicated structure in comparison to other cells. As every living thing has some functions to perform, like plants manufacturing food for itself, and making fruits and flowers which bloom in specific seasons, plants perform all these functions for its own living. Similarly, each living cell is capable of performing certain basic functions that are characteristic of all living forms. Now, a common question that comes in every mind is that, how does a living cell perform these basic functions? We know that multicellular organisms, such as humans, have a division of labor. This means that different portions of the human body perform different functions, like hands are used for eating, bathing, carrying different things, and so on. Within a single cell also, division of labor is present. In fact, each of these cells contains specialized components known as cell organelles. Each type of cell organelle has a special function, such as making new material in the cell or removing waste from the cell. A cell is able to live and perform all its functions because of these organelles. These organelles form the basic unit known as the cell. It's fascinating to note that all cells have the same organelles, regardless of their function or the organism in which they are found. Now, if we want to know what is exactly a cell made up of, and what is its structural organization, that is, how the things inside a cell are organized, we know that a cell has special components called organelles, and if we talk about the organization of the cell, in almost every cell we observe three features: plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. In this video we will study in detail about all these important features which regulate all activities inside the cell and interactions between cell and its environment. Let's start with plasma membrane or cell membrane. as skin is the outer membrane of the human body. Similarly, the cell membrane is the outer covering of a cell. It is the physical barrier for the cell, and it also separates internal and external environments for the cell, so no material from outside goes inside the cell and no material from inside goes outside the cell. It is selectively permeable in nature because it prevents movement of some materials in and out of the cell but allows the passage of other materials through it. Some substances like carbon dioxide or oxygen can move across the cell membrane by a process called diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Water also obeys the law of diffusion. The movement of water across the plasma membrane is also affected by the amount of substance dissolved in water. Let's think, what will happen if we put an animal cell or a plant cell into a solution of sugar or salt in water? So, here is the experiment to see what happens. So, when you put a cell inside a solution and if the medium surrounding the cell has a higher water concentration than the cell, meaning that the outside solution is very dilute, the cell will gain water by osmosis. Osmosis is nothing but the diffusion of water in the presence of a semi-permeable membrane, that is, plasma membrane. So, when cell gains water by osmosis, such a solution is known as a hypotonic solution. Water molecules are free to pass across the cell membrane in both directions, but more water will come into the cell than will leave. The net result is that water enters the cell. The cell is likely to swell up. Now, come to another observation, that if the medium has exactly the same water concentration as the cell, there will be no net movement of water across the cell membrane. Such a solution is known as an isotonic solution. Water crosses the cell membrane in both directions, but the amount going in is the same as the amount going out, so there is no overall movement of water. The cell will stay the same size. Now at last, if the medium has a low concentration of water than the cell, meaning that it is a very concentrated solution, the cell will lose water by osmosis. Such a solution is known as a hypotonic solution. Again, water crosses the cell membrane in both directions, but this time more water leaves the cell than enters it. Therefore, the cell will shrink. Thus, osmosis is a special case of diffusion through a selectively permeable membrane. Hence, the process by which water moves through a semi-permeable membrane from a region of high concentration to a region of lower concentration, thereby equalizing water concentration, is called osmosis. Absorption of water by plant roots is an example of osmosis. The plasma membrane is flexible and is made up of organic molecules called lipids and proteins. The flexibility of the cell membrane also enables the cell to engulf in food and other material from its external environment. Such processes are known as endocytosis. Amoeba acquires its food through such processes. Now, you can attempt a test named Transport of Material from EduRev app to test your knowledge after learning the topic of plasma membrane. Now let's study the cell wall and explore how it makes difference in a cell. Like a coconut's hard shell protects it and gives it strength, similarly, the cell wall is for plant cells. Plant cells are different from animal cells due to the presence of a cell wall. The cell wall is made of cellulose and gives a rigid structure to the plant cell. The cell wall lies outside the plasma membrane. So what happens when a living plant cell loses water through osmosis? Do the cell wall also shrink? Or will it be intact? Let's see what happens. So, there is shrinkage or contraction of the contents of the cell away from the cell wall and cell wall will be intact, and this phenomenon is known as plasmolysis. Cell walls permit the cells of plants, fungi and bacteria to withstand very dilute, hypotonic, external media without bursting. In such media the cells tend to take up water by osmosis. The cell swells, building up pressure against the cell wall. The wall exerts an equal pressure against the swollen cell. Because of their walls, Such cells can withstand much greater changes in the surrounding medium than animal cells. Let's discuss nucleus now, which contains the genetic material of the cell. Nucleus is the most prominent part of the cell, as it contains all the crucial information or hereditary information of the cell, or we can say, of the organism. Nucleus is the processing unit of the cell. It is a double membrane-bound organelle. The nuclear membrane has pores which allow the transfer of material from inside the nucleus to its outside, that is, to the cytoplasm. The nucleus contains chromosomes, which appear as rod-shaped structures only when the cell is about to divide. Chromosomes contain information for inheritance of features from parents to further generation in the form of DNA molecules. The nucleus plays a central role in cellular reproduction, the process by which a single cell divides and forms two new cells. In some organisms like bacteria, the nuclear region of the cell is poorly defined due to the absence of a nuclear membrane. Such an undefined nuclear region which contains only nucleic acids is called a nucleoid. Organisms lacking nuclear membrane are prokaryotic and organisms having nuclear membrane are eukaryotes. Prokaryotic cells also lack most of the other cytoplasmic organelles present in eukaryotic cells. Many of the functions of such organelles are also performed by poorly organized parts of the cytoplasm. So, now that we know all about the plasma membrane, cell wall and nucleus, you must read the document of the same topics in EduRev app. This will help you to revise the concepts. Also, you must go through the worksheets of the chapter as they are specially designed from the perspective of Class 9 exams. Let's discuss about cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the fluid found inside the cell which is a jelly-like water. It gives the structure to the cell and houses different organelles of the cell. In prokaryotes, beside the absence of a defined nuclear region, the membrane-bound cell organelles are also absent. On the other hand, the eukaryotic cells have nuclear membrane as well as membrane-enclosed organelles. The significance of membranes can be illustrated with the example of viruses. Viruses lack any membranes and hence do not show characteristics of life until they enter a living body and use its cell machinery to multiply. In conclusion, the three features, plasma membrane, nucleus and cytoplasm, of the cell we studied are very important for a cell to function and act like a living cell. This is it for this video as we covered all the features of a cell. In the next video we will cover all the organelles of a cell. Till then you must revise the concepts with the help of amazing EduRev notes and test your knowledge by giving tests related to the same topic in EduRev app. Thank you.